Hello and welcome back, and that is right. Do you know it's been almost a year now since we made the video here on screen, ZimaOS, the best beginner NAS OS. A video where we were talking about how ZimaOS from Icewhale was tipping itself to pretty much be the go-to NAS offering within an update when they were introducing the new licensing model at $29, and I said in both of those videos that I'd come back to this operating system in 2026 just to see how things are developing. Now they've introduced a payment model, but also talking about how this software has evolved. Because right now in summer 2026, there's actually quite a few different NAS DIY players entering the market. And with some comparisons being recorded here in the background of the channel, I thought now was a very, very good time to talk about what has changed since my coverage of this NAS operating system a year ago. Now, a few disclaimers out the gate. Number one, this isn't being sponsored by the brand. They don't know about it. They're seeing it at the same time you are. Secondly, we are utilising the Plus license version of this, so bear that in mind in order to see the majority of things that we're going to talk about today. You need to have the Plus version to get the more expansive utility. And finally, I'm not going to be going through all the facets of the software. If you want that, watch this video here. We go into an enormous amount of detail about the features and services. This video is to talk about everything that's changed and improved upon or the same over the last year or so. Now, to put that into perspective, if we make our way onto the GitHub repo for this, and they're currently running the update of version 1.6 in beta, here was the version that our original video was filmed on, 1.4.2. The later video filmed at the launch of 1.5. And there have been a lot of updates. We can see 1.151 introduced in November. And if we go to the bottom there, we can make our way into more and more updates. Some of these sub-revisional updates, each of which, by the way, being introduced into beta, something I always love. Any brand that does this, and I'm talking to you, Synology, your last few updates have gone straight out into RC and then out there into the public. When it comes to NAS and 24/7 set up and forget storage, give me a beta. Work out the bugs. I love it, I love it, I love it. And that carried on to another page of updates here, which is effectively going through everything. Now, the TLDR, I would argue 1 year on from my original video, the number of meaningful front-facing updates is actually pretty small. A lot of the work has been going on in the background. I mean, even a glance at the more recent updates there, a lot of it is to do with stability, responsiveness, and driver support there in the background. There has been a bit of extra work going on in the background with RAID functionality and stability and recovery, but I will argue that that makes it very hard to show you that on camera. And that's really something that, to learn more about this, go into the repo, but go into the community updates, where they go into a lot more detail about these updates. But the pricing hasn't changed. It's still $29 if you want to take advantage of the full lifetime subscription, but there is still the free tier there. And again, what is covered and what's included hasn't really changed. But I'll tell you one thing that has changed, and that is to do with the apps. Because not only have they included and updated a few extra bells and whistles inside ZimaOS via the user interface, but the client applications. Now, we've talked about the Zima client for Windows Desktop before, something we've used. We love the fact that it's a very easy means to set up Thunderbolt and USB 4 direct connectivity, not only with the pre-built first-party ZimaCube systems, but also registered usage online of it being used with third-party USB 4, as long as you're using the right CPU configuration there. But on top of that, things like the peer drop, something I love, the ability to communicate between all different devices and share multi-platform support. There have been a few little tweaks and upgrades in the timeline there of the release notes on those, but I would argue of all of the apps and services, the Windows and Mac client hasn't seen much in terms of front-facing changes. They tweaked things ever so slightly. I feel like it's a little bit more responsive when you're going into the dashboard now, for example. But that's really it. A lot of the work, according to the updates, has been going on there in the background. But the Android client, the mobile client, something I'll switch to now on screen, once you start utilizing that, you see that what they've kind of done with the majority of the changes there is just tighten things. So if we come out and go back into the app from the front, we'll just go into there with the Zima front facing. I've already logged in. And from there, we can see the mobile app. One of the problems we had last year was the way it was being visualized. It felt like it was just a glorified web GUI page being packaged in an app deploy. This feels a little bit more native. It feels a lot more responsive, a lot more of the playing of the different files and them all being shown there on screen. Is pretty much the way I would like to see it, and it's a lot more responsive. I'm not getting the visual conflicts that I had before. I will say, and slight spoiler alert for something later on, they have introduced encrypted storage, but as you can see, the folder is locked there. Later on in the video, I'll be walking through that because that is quite a meaningful update in the version 1.16. But I will say it's a shame that I can't unlock encrypted storage via the mobile app. There is reasons for that, I'm sure, but at least for now, I'm happy to say that as it stands right now, the management of the mobile application is significantly better than it was before. Even managing the backup operations on the mobile app are a great deal better now, with the configuration and controls aren't just a case of just cloning and repurposing what is already visible via the desktop appliance and you're just having some little window. You can go ahead and create full backup ops there in the background from the mobile app, and it's responsive, it's doing what it says on the tin. But beyond the mobile application, they have also integrated a few different extra plugins and apps. So you've always had the iOS and Android app, and you've always had Mac and Windows level support for that client app that we just described there. But what you've also got now is 3 more plugin tools. So you've got ZimaNode for Chrome. This is effectively a NAS management window here that allows you to play around and access some of the elements of your ZimaOS NAS, but directly via that plugin there within Chrome. How much you can do and how much of it is just a glorified shortcut wheel, it's still very early days for that, but I will say it's quite a handy little thing to have when I've been managing multiple NAS devices. But alongside that, you've got CTOZ, which is a migration tool for those that are already using Casa or indeed using other ZimaOS systems for migration, something that people have been asking for a while. And finally, for markup, markdown, you can utilize knowledge-based applications like Obsidian there and utilize their OZ-Sync tool to back up and have some of the access file back and forth between those knowledge bases and the Zima NAS system, something that you could already kind of do with different containers, but it's nice to have a proprietary application in order to get that done. So again, you can see that they are still working on the apps and sync tools there, but I will say there is still a shame that I don't really have the synchronization tool, something that I talked about with FIGO's sync tool in a previous video. And I know that seems like a bit of a clumsy insertion for a different NAS operating system, but the reason I bring it up is, again, as mentioned, I'm preparing different NAS comparison videos, and one comparison you guys have been asking about is FIGO OS versus ZimaOS, and that should be done very, very soon. But one of the things I praised FIGO for was the integration of that synchronization system with their synced client tool. So by that, what I mean is the ability, once I've got a folder synchronized with FIGO OS server, the ability to free up space as I access files that are only being shown as a digital footprint on my local client system. Once I access them, then they are downloaded to my local client, and then it allows me to delete that data on my local system if I choose, without it deleting it from the remote NAS. That's something that very few DIY NAS vendors provide at the moment, and something that really only turnkey paid NAS solutions like Synology and QNAP and more offer right now. So that's something I wish that ZimaOS had right now, and is one of many details that I will be covering in that comparison. I wouldn't normally be so harsh as to bring up another NAS brand, but with FIGO rolling out right now at $199 and ZimaOS at just $29, it is going to be interesting to talk about in that later video just what each of these platforms is offering you, with live synchronization via the client on both mobile and desktop, I think being a desirable factor for those migrating away from turnkey like Synology and QNAP. But let's not bury the lead. It's nice that it's very easy to start pinning different folders to your client system, Mac, Windows or otherwise. The fact that there isn't the live streaming and file pinning isn't going to be, bothering everyone. So at the very least, you've got that ease of access in this $29 software, or even free if you choose. But what about ZimaOS itself? I've gone this far into the video and not played enough with the desktop experience for many of you. Well, a big reason for that, as I mentioned in the intro, is the actual user experience of ZimaOS hasn't changed meaningfully in a year. Now that sounds harsh. Let me preface that by saying it feels more responsive, and a lot of the work, as mentioned in the intro, has been happening in the back end. So for example, when we look at the developer mode there, a lot of the features that are being added and enabled are imminently and easily available there in the background, very, very easily for development in some of these beta updates there. Accessing it remotely using the relay supplied by Icewhale there works great. I've not seen any security issues there in the background. And what vulnerabilities have been spotted in the lifetime of any software have been addressed and have been looked at and explored and repaired in one of the many, many updates. As mentioned, a lot of this is to do with background fixes and repairs. When we look back at the general settings there, other things that have been added, for example, is broader and better UPS support there, and it's been tweaked and enabled and improved upon. But as mentioned, one of the biggest updates to this has come in the form of encryption. Now, they have gone about encryption, I would argue, in one particular way, very well. So, for example, I've already got an encrypted test folder there, and as you can see, the folder is locked. So let's go ahead and unlock that. I'm pretty sure I keyed that password incorrectly. So if we go in and have a look, we can see auto-locking policy is only instituted alongside the password. So that's a good thing. It means that when we are initiating any kind of changes, it's not something we can do once we're in and then bugger around. It's done at the point of entry there. So for example, I can have it only open for 15 minutes. We will come back to this window shortly. Now we can have a downloadable key file, something I've already created. So we go into the download folder there. I can select my key file there in downloads, click create, upload, and then unlock, and it unlocks this folder we've created there, which is lovely stuff. And if we go back in, if we want to, at a moment's notice, in the folder selection, right click, actually no, we'll go to the three dots and we want to lock this folder up. You can see the timer, lock now, bang, locked. But what I really like about it is we can have it so it's unlocked until shutdown. Now, the reason that's important isn't just the obvious stuff, like you don't want to lose access, but if this system reboots from an update when I'm out of office, if it updates due to any number of reasons, maybe it's from a UPS, maybe it's just a standard shutdown and reboot, maybe I've gone in and taken advantage of some of the power operation stuff in the background where you can do a scheduled on and off if you choose to. Something, again, I really like that they've included in this system to allow the system to turn itself on and on a schedule. Again, you'll be surprised how many NASes don't include that feature. But the idea that it'll be dismounted upon a reboot, upon shutdown, and it needs the password every time is exactly how I want my encrypted folders to work. I'm looking at you again, Synology, when you instituted your own encrypted storage system on shared folders. There was a system whereby the key was actually kept inside the system in a vault. Sometimes people use that, but I like the idea that that option isn't presented here and it dismounts an encrypted folder upon a reboot. Also, not only do Icewhale state that they're taking advantage of AES 256-bit encryption, but this is being done on the streaming process. So that's encryption and decryption during read and write respectively is done on the fly. That, alongside the fact that if you lose your key or you forget your password, they themselves can't even recover it, for me, is a good thing. Also, apparently larger volume files can be encrypted into smaller chunks, which is better for write transfers, and also in the event of interrupted transfers for recovery and stuff like that. And again, your CPU and architecture of choice will make a difference on the encrypted performance. I'm not going to show that here because, frankly, this is not utilizing any of their hardware. This is utilizing an old little Nook box that I'm running. So again, it wouldn't be fair to sort of judge its encrypted performance based on hardware that they themselves don't sell. Now, as I said, most of the more meaningful updates have happened in the background. I mean, when we break down here into, move that to the side of the screen, just things that have been added in the last almost a year. you know, some of these things are very small, but I think impactful for some. So, for example, it seems bonkers to me that you didn't have the means to change the background to be more reactive in dark and light modes than before. The added addition of other cloud platforms could still do with having a few more there. But at least it's easy, and I always like the way this was done within ZimaOS. Stuff like driver support in the background, whether it is network drivers, graphical card drivers. But I will say something you may already have noticed. There's a lot of dupes in that scroll that we did earlier on. A lot of that is to do with some of the beta version 1, beta version 2, beta version 3 being effectively the same text. So there is an argument for some of this just being the same thing across different updates. Not vast amounts and more kind of sharpening of edges and stuff like that, but it's maybe worth keeping that in mind. The stuff that's fixed is pretty substantial too. I've not included a lot of the security patches and updates in this scroll, simply because a lot of it would just be longer than both of these lists as they've gone through and closed a lot of the potential loopholes, kind of background admin level access that's been closed up there in the background between different access points. There's still no integration of ZFS, and I appreciate that is an enormous task. But I do think until they start engaging with it a little bit more formally without command line to kind of patch things over, which never feels the most stable, I think that is always going to be a barrier for a lot of storage veterans to meaningfully trust this platform. I do love when you go to the community pages and you go through some of the community updates. Some of the stuff being done by some of those guys is incredible. And frankly, when you hear about some of the things where some of this is getting rolled out, resulting in boot loops, you know, they're not doing this with mission critical data. Still, nonetheless, I do think this platform is still a little ways away from being a sturdy storage base for a lot of storage veterans to really get behind yet. But again, at $29, it's still providing a huge amount compared with some of the other options in the market. There is still things missing for me. For example, two-factor authentication. For example, write once, read many support. Some of these things will be improved upon, or at least available if they were to engage with ZFS, which, given a lot of their hardware base, it is an option. But still, at the very least right now, for $29, this does still present incredible value there. I just think it is still quite a light platform for good and in some cases for bad. That said, because of that lightness, it is still currently the go-to test platform that we use here at NAS Compares when we're testing DIY NAS systems, due to the kind of really impressive low impact this platform has in terms of overall system hardware in order for us to bench test different CPUs and storage configurations there. I love the fact that we can still utilize the storage area from the OS disk. There's a lot of NAS platforms out there that don't allow you to do that, and not only do they allow you to do that, but they integrate all the other features and services as well, whether it is that you want to run individual virtual machines, which again we talked about before with the downloadable ISOs, and you want it to run from there, or you want to create those encrypted layers of storage on the OS disk. As I say, I like that there's no meat left on the table going to waste. There's a lot to like here, and the optimization, hopefully throughout the course of my browsing in this video so far, kind of demonstrates to you just how much good work has gone on there in the background in terms of improvement, optimization, just fluidity and stability there. But again, keep your expectations at that $29 lifetime price tag, which is still an absolute banger of a price, and do stay tuned for when we start comparing that against FIGO soon at its $199 and soon $299 price tag. But more on that, I won't spoil that video. At least for now, the updates I've seen in a year still pretty much convinced me that ZimaOS is still an incredible, and if not the go-to entry point for those migrating away from turnkey NAS into DIY, at the very least, worth your attention. It's not the most mature, it's not even the most feature-rich, but at the price point of what you are getting, particularly the client support, be it mobile or desktop, there's a lot to love here and a lot to get behind. But I will continue to keep an eye on ZimaOS moving forward and any meaningful updates in the future. And do stay tuned for comparisons between not only this and the likes of XOS and FIGO, but some other NAS operating systems that are slowly crawling out of the wild right now in summer 2026. Thank you so much for watching. There's a link to download this below if you like. Use it, ignore it, it's up to you. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.